Today we're going to go through all of the red cards in the Lost Caverns of Ixalan to break down all the cards I think will have the biggest impact in Standard for upgrading and creating new meta decks and budget decks. And we're going to run through them as quickly as possible, rounding up at the end with my favourite rare and budget cards of the set. I'm also going to mention any like synergies, combos, cards to look out for while drafting as well. If you draft to build up your collection at the beginning of a new set, that's going to be really useful for you as well. So we're going to go through all those now. Welcome back to the channel. Okay, we're breaking down all the red cards, and there are some really cool red cards in this set. And we're looking out for, in particular, cards that match up with the two color archetypes of the set. So with red, when it's paired with white, you have a kind of tapping mid-range style of deck. When it's paired with blue, we have a pirate artifact aggro deck. Paired with black is descend aggro, and with green is a dinosaur stompy deck, which I think might be my favorite of all of the different deck types there. So we're going to get into these really quickly. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already, so you don't miss out on any future videos breaking down these kind of things. Okay, so the red cards. Starting out with a really simple one. It's a Braid. We already have this in Standard. It's 2 mana, instant, 3 damage to target creature or destroy target artifact. It's the same as the Braid we already have. Exactly the same. Okay, that's easy. Okay, so it's a 2 mana instant. The next one, Ancestor's Aid. And target creature gets +2/+0 and gains first strike till end of turn, which is a pretty normal combat trick. And you also get to create a treasure token. So in a kind of pirates aggro deck, you're creating treasure, which is an artifact, and that might be important. Other than that, it's standard, slightly boring combat trick. Then let's move on to Belligerent Yearling. It's a 2 mana, 3/2 dinosaur with trample, which I like already. But then, whenever another dinosaur enters the battlefield under your control, you may have Belligerent Yearling's base power become equal to that creature's base power until end of turn. Now we have some dinosaurs in this set with big power, and this being a 3/2, especially with trample, the 2 mana is good as it is. But if you play a 5 power dinosaur, this now becomes a 5/2 with trample. It's only 2 toughness, so it could be killed. But still, that's a lot of value you're getting for a 2 mana creature. The Belligerent Yearling is a favorite of mine already. Okay, moving on, we have Bonehorde Dracosaur, a 5 mana 5/5 dinosaur dragon. It's a flying and first strike creature, and at the beginning of your upkeep, so as long as this doesn't get killed after you play it, beginning of your next turn, you exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. You exile a land. In those 2, you get to create a 3/1 red dinosaur creature token. And if you exile a non-land, you get to create a treasure token. If you have one of each, then you get both triggers. If you have 2 lands, you only get 1 dinosaur. If you have 2 non-lands, you only get 1 treasure. I believe that's how that works. So yeah, it's a really good mythic rare from the set. It's the kind that if you get this in a draft game, you've basically won. Your opponent pretty much can't attack with anything with toughness 5 or less, because your Dracosaur is just going to kill it before it gets a chance to do anything, and it's flying, so it has the evasion as well. So yeah, this is a great card. I'm going to be playing this in Constructed, and we'll see how well either a dragon or dinosaur deck does in the next set. It's going to be good, I think. Okay, then we've got Brass's Tunnel Grinder, a 3 mana legendary artifact. When it enters the battlefield, you discard any number of cards and draw that many cards +1, so it's kind of just replacing itself. And at the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, which you will when you play this out because you're discarding something, you put a bore counter on the Tunnel Grinder. Then if there are 3 or more bore counters on it, you remove those counters and transform it. So it gets 1 for free, basically, when you play it out. 2 more turns you have to descend, and then you get to transform it into Tekutlan, the Searing Rift. These things are so hard to say. It's a legendary land, it's a cave. Tap it for red mana, but also whenever you cast a permanent spell using mana produced by this land, you get to discover X, where X is that spell's mana value. So everything kind of gets its own cascade-like effect. You might get to cast something for free, or just put it into your hand whenever you cast a permanent spell with this. So pretty much once every turn you get to discover, which is really cool. So yeah, it's pretty decent 3-mana artifact. You get lots of value from that. As long as you get to transform it. By itself, it doesn't do much, but if you get to transform it, getting that extra discover ability every turn is really cool. Okay, we've got Brazen Blade Master, a 3-mana 2/3 orc pirate. When it attacks, if you control 2 or more artifacts, it gets +2/+1 till end of turn. So a 2/3 for 3 mana in an aggressive style of deck is not very exciting, but if it becomes a 4/4 and you control 2 or more artifacts, that's not bad. For 3 mana, it's still not the most amazing thing, because you still need to have 2 artifacts to trigger that ability. But getting treasure tokens or equipment is not that hard to get 2 artifacts. There's still a 4/4 for 3 mana that could potentially just be a 2/3. Yeah, I'd probably take it in a draft, but it's not going to be the best card I have. So we've got Breach's Eager Pillager, a 3-mana 3/3 legendary creature goblin pirate. It has first strike, which is nice, and whenever a pirate you control attacks, you return one, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. Create a treasure token, target creature can't block, or exile the top card of your library. You may play it this turn. Next turn has to be this turn. So whenever a pirate you control attacks, you could play this out on turn 3 and attack with whichever pirate you cast on turn 2, and then you get that ability straight away. And also, it's not whenever one or more pirates attacks, it's whenever a pirate attacks. So if you attack with 3 pirates, you get all 3 of those abilities. So you get to create treasure tokens for ramping, stopping blockers, and getting an extra card off the top as well. So definitely a really good enabler for a pirate aggro deck, which is why it's a rare. But it's a good card. First strike helps a lot because it makes it much easier to attack with it, because the opponent doesn't necessarily want to block. So Breaches is definitely a good one. Okay, we've got Burning Sun Cavalry, a 2-mana 2/2 human knight. Whenever it attacks or blocks while you control a dinosaur, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So it's a 2-mana 3/3 as long as you have a dinosaur. It's good. It goes with other dinosaurs, but I would probably prefer to have a 2-mana dinosaur rather than having a human knight that gets benefit from having other dinosaurs. So it's okay. Not the best card. Okay. Then we have Calamitous Cave-In, a 4-mana sorcery. It deals X damage to each creature and each planeswalker, where X is the number of caves you control, plus the number of cave cards in your graveyard. So again, in draft, you probably won't have that many caves, because you can't necessarily pick that many for your deck. But in Constructed, if you're going to make a deck full of caves, then this can do, well, you need to have like at least 4 for this to be kind of on the level of like Brotherhood's End, which is 3 damage for 3 mana, Burn Down the House, which is 5 damage for 5 mana. So for 4 mana, you kind of want to do at least 4 damage to each creature and each planeswalker, because if you don't have at least X equaling 4, then this is below rate for Brotherhood's End. So yeah, it's just entirely depends on the number of caves you have. Okay, right, on to the next load. Okay, so we've got Child of the Volcano, a 4-mana 3/3 creature. It's an elemental with trample. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Child of the Volcano. So in a black and red descend deck, going to get this from a 3/3 to a 4/4 at the end of the first turn, which is good. You've descended, and then after that, growing each turn, 5/5, 6/6. It's going to be really good in draft. In Constructed, I don't see the descend thing necessarily being the biggest thing in Constructed, but we'll see. It does. Obviously, there are many ways to trigger descend, from discarding, cycling triome lands, or plane cycling, the other land cycling. So yeah, there's loads of ways of getting things into your graveyard. Sacrificing treasure tokens should do it. So we'll see. There's potentially lots of ways of making it work. Whether it's going to be a really competitive synergy in Constructed and Standard, then we'll see. Okay, we have Curator of Sun's Creation, a 4-mana 3/3 human artificer. Whenever you discover again for the same value. It triggers only once each turn. So obviously the stats are a bit low because the benefit is potentially really high. If you have a deck that has lots of discovering, then doubling that is going to make a big difference for you. You're going to get either extra cards into your hand or cast lots of things for free each turn. It's a good one to play around with. It's only uncommon, so it wouldn't be too much of a waste of a wild card if you happen to craft it and it didn't work out. But I'd wait to see how Discover decks really work, if they're really that competitive or not. Alright, then we have Daring Discovery, a 5-mana sorcery. Up to 3 target creatures can't block this turn, and you discover 4. So it's good for being aggressive, stopping the opponent's blockers so you can get through and do lots of damage. You also get to discover 4, and if you had the other one, if you have the Curator as well, you discover 4 twice. So that would be fun. The only thing with discovering, which we're waiting to really see how this pans out when we're building our decks, is that discovering is almost like what Atali does when it enters already. You're exiling cards from the top of your library, and with Atali you can cast things no matter what the cost, but this has a limit. It can't be more than 4 for this card, and obviously different cards have different amounts. The only difference is you don't have to cast it, you can put it into your hand instead, which is an extra benefit. So we have the limitation and we have the extra benefit to go with it. So we'll see how well that works. You could easily just pick out a 1-mana rubbish card and it goes into your hand and doesn't really do anything. But you get that with Atali at the moment, right? You could just get any tiny card that isn't really going to help you, or you could get someone's Portal to Phyrexia. So it completely depends on what happens to be at the top. It's a bit of a gamble, and yeah, it's probably not the best card for consistency, this kind of thing. But possibly if you're going really wide and want to stop the opponent from blocking things to get things through, it could work out. I wouldn't bank on that one though. Okay, then we have Diamond Pickaxe. It's going to be a favorite for all Minecraft fans everywhere. It's a 1-mana artifact. It's indestructible, which is nice. And the equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has, whenever this attacks, create a treasure token. So lots of treasure tokens we're going to be making. The boost isn't necessarily that great itself, but there are ways to animate artifacts. We can do this already with like Tough Cookie, but you can do it with I think it was a blue card in this set as well. And because Diamond Pickaxe is indestructible, if we can animate that to become a creature, it's now an indestructible creature. So that's really cool. As an equipment, I think it's okay. Creating treasures obviously helps ramp and helps other artifact synergies. This is also an artifact itself, so you're going to have at least 2 artifacts when you attack with this. So yeah, I think it could work in those kind of decks, but might not be the most amazing thing ever. Okay, then we've got Dinotomaton, a 4-mana 4/3 artifact dinosaur. It has menace, and when it enters the battlefield, a creature you control gains menace till end of turn. So again, a very aggressive kind of creature. The fact that it's an artifact creature is quite nice in standard because Go for the Throat is the most common removal spell for the majority of creatures. So being able to dodge that, and it's not too small, it's going to get caught out by a cut down as well. So yeah, it's okay. Not the best aggressive card. It's probably work out well in draft, but not necessarily in constructed in standard. Okay, then we've got Dire Flail. Now this is a rare equipment, and artifact equipments tend to be not the most amazing cards. This is a 1-mana artifact. Equipped creature gets +2/+0. It equips for 1, which is pretty standard, but the thing that makes this slightly better is that you can craft with artifact for 5 mana, and it becomes the Dire Blunderbuss. Now, the equipped creature then gets +3/+0, and has whenever it attacks, you may sacrifice an artifact other than Dire Blunderbuss. When you do, this creature deals damage equal to its power to target creature. So, however much power it has to start with, it has 3 more, and you could sacrifice anything, probably a treasure, and then you get to do whatever that damage is to any other creature to take it out. So a very good aggressive card. Depends on being able to create artifacts in quick enough that you can sacrifice one every turn. but there are ways of doing that. There's obviously things like, Onicult Anvil kind of artifact sacrificing decks already, so it could work in something like that in Standard. And in Draft, I don't know if it would, because you need to have a way of making sure you can definitely produce those artifacts every turn, and you might not have that in Draft. So then we have Dowsing Device, a 2-mana artifact. Whenever it or another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, up to one target creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains haste till end of turn. Then you transform Dowsing Device if you control 4 or more artifacts. So again, lots of artifacts needed. And then it becomes a land where you can tap it, pay 3, and target creature gains haste and gets +X/+0, where X is the number of artifacts you control. So obviously, the whole thing is very artifact heavy. You have to control at least 4 or more artifacts to be able to transform this. So the +X is probably going to be at least 4. It doesn't say other artifacts, so Dowsing Device is an artifact in itself. So you have to have 3 more other than Dowsing Device. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be the biggest card ever. A lot of these cards won't be the most revolutionary cards in Standard. A lot of them won't see very much play. But yeah, we'll see. There's definitely some other ones that will do. All right, we've got a 1-mana instant, Dreadmoor's Ire. Till end of turn, target attacking creature gets +2/+2, gains trample, and when it deals combat damage to a player, destroy target artifact that player controls. How good this is entirely depends on the opponent having artifacts. Because there are quite a few artifacts in this set, but it definitely feels like they are, then this would probably be better in a Lost Caverns of Ixalan constructed midweek Magic event, or in draft events possibly. But in Standard, I don't think so much. It's +2/+2 and trample. It's kind of like having a monstrous rage. It's not that much different. Slightly lower on power, slightly higher on toughness, and can potentially destroy an artifact. But considering a lot of decks don't play artifacts, that extra is kind of wasted. Okay, we've got Enterprising Scallywag, a 2-mana 2/2 creature, the Goblin Pirate, and at the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, you create a treasure token. So, bearing in mind there's lots of ways to descend, then creating a treasure token is not too hard, so it gets to ramp a bit. It could be good in a few different decks, but other than that, it's pretty much just a 2-mana 2/2, so it's a standard creature, really. Okay, then we have an enchantment, Itali's Favor. It's a 3-mana aura, and when it enters the battlefield, you get to discover 3. So you find a non-land card with mana value 3 or less, and you can cast it for free, or put it into your hand, and the enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has trample. So if you compare this to other things we have in Standard now, one thing that comes to mind is Audacity, which is green, but apart from that fact, it's only a 1-mana. It gives something +2 and trample, and you get to draw a card when the creature dies, or when the Audacity goes to the graveyard. So it's very similar, apart from this costs 3 and that costs 1. So I kind of feel like if this cost a bit less, it might be a better card to have. But again, it depends on how much Discover really helps and what kind of things you happen to pick from that, which is obviously completely random. So as long as you've got some really good things that are mana value 3 or less, you could use this. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't. Okay, and then you've got Geological Appraiser, a 4-mana 3/2 human artificer. When it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, discover 3. They don't want you cheating by blinking it. But yeah, 4-mana, you basically get this and potentially another 3-mana spell for free, which would be really good if it hits a good thing. But like I said, it's all random with Discover, so we'll see how that works out. You can kind of maximize these things by having maybe no permanent 1-mana or 2-mana cards in the whole deck, and you have maybe just spells at 1 or 2-mana. And so by doing this, you're going to hit a 3-mana spell off the Discover. You can kind of maximize the benefit in that way. I don't know if that really makes it that amazing, but maybe that would make it a bit better. Okay, we've got Goblin Tomb Raider, a 1-mana 1/2 creature. It's a Goblin Pirate, and as long as you control an artifact, it gets +1/+0 and has haste. So a 1-mana 2/2 haste creature as long as you have an artifact, which in this deck you probably will, in one way or another, have a treasure token or an equipment. So 2/2 haste for 1 mana is a good creature, and a 1/2 1 mana isn't terrible. The haste makes it a lot better, and the +1 makes it a lot better. So, yeah, if you have an artifact, it's good. If you don't have an artifact, it's okay. Then we have Gold Fury Strider, a 5-mana 3/5 artifact golem creature. It has trample, and then you can also tap 2 untapped artifacts or creatures you control, and a creature gets +2/+0 till end of turn, activate only as a sorcery. So, in theory, you have a couple of artifacts. This could be a 5/5 trample for 5 mana, which is good, but not groundbreaking. If you don't have the artifacts to tap, then it's a 3/5, which trample doesn't really do that much when you only have a 3-power creature. You kind of want it to be like a 5/3 or the other way around. So it's okay. But yeah, there's definitely lots of other things I'd rather have for 5 mana than the Gold Fury Strider. Okay, we have Hit the Motherlode. This is an interesting one. This is 7 mana sorcery. You get to discover 10. So you could hit anything that's a 10 mana spell if you have any 10 mana spells and cast it for free. If the discovered mana's value is less than 10, which it most likely will be, don't waste that. You get to create a number of tapped treasure tokens equal to the difference. So if you get out a 5 mana spell, you get 5 treasure tokens. This is a way of getting a huge amount of treasure. In fact, if you happen to hit a 1 mana spell, you would be spending 7 mana, getting that 1 mana spell out, or putting it into your hand, and you would create 9 treasure tokens. So, as long as you have something that requires treasure tokens to be out, or if you have something to cast on your next turn that could make use of potentially 9 treasure tokens, then this is definitely a fun one to play around with. In draft, I wouldn't use it, but in constructed, there's probably some funny things you could do with it. Okay, we have Hotfoot Gnome, a 3-mana 3/1 artifact creature. It's a gnome with haste, and you can tap it. Another target creature gains haste till end of turn. So it's good to enable these kind of aggressive strategies. If you have any other big creature that doesn't have haste, you can play this out, attack with it if you want to. But you don't even need to attack with it because haste means it can be tapped on its on the turn it comes out. So you could even use this just as a 3-mana give something else haste immediately. Play this out, tap it on the first turn. Or you can attack with it, and then from then on you have automatically give anything you want haste. So that can be fun if you have other big, possibly trampley creatures that don't have haste that could really do with it, then this would work out pretty well for that. Okay, we've got Idol of the Deep King, a 3-mana artifact with flash. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to any target, which is okay to start with. But you can craft with artifact 3 mana, and it becomes the Sovereign's Makahuti. Makahutul? These things I really should practice how to pronounce them. Okay, tell me how you pronounce that in the comments because I don't know. It's an equipment artifact, and when it enters the battlefield, attach it to a target creature straight away, which is good. Equipped creature gets +2/+0, and you can re-equip it for 2. So, the fact that it does 2 damage, 3 mana to start with, and you can craft it to make something get +2. It's okay. It's really not that exciting, and it's too hard to say. So let's move on from that one. Okay, we have Inti. Senecal of the Sun is a 2-mana 2/2. It's a legendary human knight. Whenever you attack, you may discard a card, which enables descend. And when you do, put +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature. It gains trample to the end of turn. It could be on itself, so it could be a 3/3 trample. And whenever you discard one or more cards, exile top card of your library. You may play that card until your next end step. Your next end step, if you're discarding it in the middle of your turn, then you have till the end of this turn to do it. If you're discarding it on your end step, you have until the end of your next turn to do it. So that might be working out better for you. Might be good with things like blood tokens, because if you wait to your end step, or on your opponent's turn, sacrifice your blood token. You're discarding a card. You get to exile the top card of your library, and you get the replacement, drawing an extra card from the blood token. There's things you could do to kind of double up on that and get some extra value. The fact that you're basically, adding a +1/+1 counter each turn if you're discarding a card, that really helps boost the creature, but you have to have things to discard. If you discard too much, you'll end up with no cards in your hand. So it depends on what you have. If you manage to draw enough, then yeah, this will work out pretty well as an aggressive card. And then we have Magmatic Galleon, a 5-mana 5/5 artifact vehicle. It enters the battlefield doing 5 damage to a creature an opponent controls, which is okay, 5 mana, 5 damage to start with. Whenever one or more creatures your opponents control are dealt excess non-combat damage, create a treasure token. So if you hit something that has 4 toughness or less, then automatically it's going to make its first treasure token. And then on any other turn, you do additional non-combat damage, so things like burn spells, anything that isn't happening during that combat, attacking and blocking, then creating a treasure token every turn, only up to 1, because it's whenever 1 or more creatures. Although it could be, actually, if it happens at different times, you would make more than 1 treasure token. If you cast a lightning strike on something, and it only had 2 toughness, then you would make a treasure token. If you then cast another lightning strike on something else, and had the same effect, it would create another treasure token. But if you cast Burn Down the House and hit everything, it would only make 1, because it all triggers at the same time. So again, a way to ramp. It's crew 2, 5/5. It's okay. It's nice to be able to have ways to ramp and create extra artifacts. So we'll see how that plays out. Vehicles I don't tend to like that much, because you need to have the creature to crew it. If you don't have a creature to crew it, it just sits at the side and can't do anything. Okay, then we've got Ogre and Axonil, Deepest Might, a 4-mana 4/4 legendary creature. It's a god with trample. A red source you control would deal an amount of non-combat damage less than its power to an opponent. That source deals damage equal to its power instead. When this dies, return to the battlefield tapped and transformed under its owner's control. Now, before we flip it over and look at the other side, this basically means that in Anvil decks, in anything that's going to do, 1 damage to the opponent that isn't in combat, so you put out a Command Your Faces Carcassonne, that does 1 non-combat damage to the opponent. That's now going to do 4 damage to the opponent at the very least, unless you increase Ogre Axonil's power to more than 4. It will do damage equal to its power. So put a +1 counter on this. Now everything does 5 damage. So I can see this working out in lots of red aggro decks. I don't know if it's going to kind of overtake Godric and potentially Urabrask's Forge, which people are using a lot right now. But it does mean that, anything with red in it is going to do 4 damage instead of 1 at the very least. So I can see this happening in Anvil decks, because Anvil is red and black. And that's going to become kind of crazy. So we'll look out for that happening. I don't know if it's necessarily going to happen a lot in draft, but in constructed, I reckon we'll see this quite a lot. And we haven't transformed it yet. So let's transform it. When it dies, it was when it dies, yeah. When it dies, you return it tapped as the land. And you can then, on your next turn, I guess, pay 3 mana to transform it. Activate only if red sources you control dealt 4 or more non-combat damage this turn, and only as a sorcery. So you need to do 4 damage, 4 non-combat damage, without the benefit of kind of automatically upgrading your power. So you need to do a Stoke the Flames, hit the opponent with that, and then you get to flip this back over. But whatever you're going to do is probably going to cost some mana. So having an extra 3 to transform it back might not be easy. But it possibly, this helps you ramp as well, so it gives you extra mana. So you could just use it as land if it happens to die. So yeah, definitely one I think we're going to see a lot in those kind of red decks that like to ping the opponent over and over again. Okay, we have Panicked Altasaur, a 5-mana 4/5 dinosaur with reach, and you can tap it to do 2 damage to each opponent. So it's good as a blocker. It has reach, which is good for blocking. It has 5 toughness, which is good for blocking. You can just play this out and not attack with it, but just at the end of your opponent's turn, before it comes back to your turn, just tap it after it's done its blocking, or if it's about to die, tap it whenever at the last possible moment. Do an extra 2 damage to each opponent. This can definitely drain them out. And don't forget, anything that we see that does extra damage to the opponent that is not combat damage, don't forget we can make that 4 damage when we tap it, or more. So yeah, that can definitely do a lot if in the right deck. Not a very aggro card because it's going to slowly do that damage over time, and it has to stay back and block. But it's kind of got inevitability built into it. If you can't get past a 4/5, then your opponent would be able to just kill you with this eventually. Okay, right, next on to the next page. And then we've got Plundering Pirate, a 3-mana 3/2 creature. It's an orc pirate. When it enters the battlefield, you create a treasure token. So although you're paying 3 mana and getting a 3/2, which is not the best rate of stats, you're actually getting a treasure token back. So it's like you're paying 2 mana overall for this, and it helps you ramp on your next turn. So it's not amazing, but if you want to ramp up to some bigger things or need those artifacts, different synergies, then this could work out. In standard, probably not. Okay, so Poetic Ingenuity, a 3-mana enchantment. Whenever one or more dinosaurs you control attack, create that many treasure tokens for the number of dinosaurs. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, create a 3/1 red dinosaur creature token. It only triggers once each turn. So dinosaurs and artifacts working out pretty well together. So this is 3 mana, and then you can, in theory, create dinosaurs every turn if you're just casting lots of artifacts. And if you're casting artifact dinosaurs, then you get double the dinosaurs I guess, and then you can attack with those dinosaurs, make those as treasure tokens. It kind of spirals out of control. So I can see this working quite well in a slightly slower, because you want to get that value over time, slightly slower kind of deck, but something with lots of artifacts that wants to make lots of dinosaurs. This could work out really well. We've got Rampaging Ceratops, a 5-mana 5/4 creature. It can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures. So it's like Super Menace. It's not just 2 creatures that have to block it. You need 3 creatures to slow this down. It's good if your opponent doesn't have enough creatures. If they only have 2 creatures, this is not, it's unblockable, which is nice. 5 is a pretty big amount of power to do. Yeah, so if you can manage your opponent's creatures, Rampaging Ceratops can get through pretty well. Still not the best thing. I'd rather have 5 mana because the Dracosaur still beats that, but it's yeah, obviously more of a budget option. Okay, so next we have Rumbling Rockslide, a 4-mana sorcery. It deals damage to target creature equal to the number of lands you control. So, if you're ramping up and getting more lands out, that's great. In general, this is going to do at least 4 damage, although you could get there with 3 lands and 1 treasure token. But let's say in general, it's going to do 4 damage to a creature. Later on, it's going to scale up and do more damage without the extra cost. So it's a bit like Light Up the Night is like an X cost card. So you can cast it for higher amounts of damage, but it costs you more mana. This doesn't. So that in itself is good. 4 mana to kill something. Yeah, it's good if it does kill it, but there are some things with high toughness here, so it might not be enough to kill a lot of big creatures. So it's okay as removal goes, but not the best. Okay, we have Sahili's Lattice next. Is a 2-mana artifact. When it enters the battlefield, you may discard a card. If you do, draw 2 cards. So it kind of replaces itself and enables Descend. And then you can also craft with 1 or more dinosaurs, because Sahili likes dinosaurs. 5 mana, and it becomes the Mastercraft Raptor. It's an artifact creature with a power star, toughness 4. Its power is actually equal to the total power of the exiled cards used to craft it, which is kind of interesting. So, exile it with 1 or more dinosaurs you control, or dinosaur cards from your graveyard. So if you discard a really powerful dinosaur, or it gets killed. Let's just say you could cheat this out early, put a powerful dinosaur into your graveyard with Explore or something like that, and you can craft that. Yeah, and basically the Mastercraft Raptor could have huge amounts of power, whatever the exile cards was. So yeah, big creature gets replaced basically by big creature here. So is it really any good? It relies on you having a decent dinosaur. I mean, you have to have a dinosaur to start with. So if you don't have other dinosaurs, it's not going to work. If you have a dinosaur synergy deck, then this could be one worth trying out. Okay, then we've got Scytheclaw Raptor, a 3-mana 4/3 dinosaur creature. Whenever a player casts a spell, if it's not their turn, Scytheclaw Raptor deals 4 damage to them. Now, this is like the enemy of mono blue or of lots of control decks who want to cast things on your turn. They don't want to cast things on their own turn, but this will do 4 damage for every spell they cast if it's not their turn. And it's for both players. So you don't want to cast things on your opponent's turn because you're going to take 4 damage unless you really need to and know you can afford that life loss. And it's a 4/3 for 3 mana, which is okay to start with. But yeah, definitely shuts down lots of decks. Don't get quite so many instants in draft as you do in standard because draft usually focuses more on the creatures. But yeah, an extra 4 damage, even if it's just once, that's good. If it stops them from countering something because they're going to take 4 damage for it, then that's good. But if it does gets that damage like ongoing, extra value, if the opponent's drawing extra cards, casting things on your turn that aren't removal, then it's going to do a lot of damage to the opponent. I really quite like this one. Okay, then we have Seismic Monstrosaur, a 6-mana 6/5 trample dinosaur. You can pay 3 mana to sacrifice a land and draw a card. And you can also mountain cycle it, so pay 2 mana, discard it, and look for a mountain card and put it into your hand. So this is the kind of thing where you could get a big dinosaur into your graveyard and use that to craft a Sahili's Lattice. So you can take the 6/5 and then suddenly the Mastercraft Raptor is a 6/4. Because this Seismic Monstrosaur has been put into the graveyard. So yeah, there's definitely different ways we could use that. But also, if you just get to casting it 6 mana, possibly earlier, because there's lots of ways of creating treasure, 6/5 trample that can sacrifice a land, draw a card if you happen to flood out, or just ignore that ability if you don't. It's okay. I'd use that definitely, especially with the versatility of being able to mountain cycle if you draw it too early. Okay, then we have Sunfire Torch. It's a 3-mana artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+0 and has whenever it attacks, you may sacrifice the torch. When you do, it deals 2 damage to any target. And you can equip it for 1. So you're paying 1 to play this out, 1 to equip it. The equipped creature gets +1, and if it attacks, then sacrifice the torch to do 2 damage to something. But then the creature isn't equipped, doesn't get the extra +1 power, so it kind of works against itself. I don't really see this working out too much. It just sacrifices itself straight away for 2 damage. You're basically paying 2 to do 2 damage at the very best. Okay, we've got Sunshot Militia. 2 mana, 1/3 human soldier. You tap 2 untapped artifacts and or creatures you control, and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. You need to have those artifacts or creatures to tap, and you can do this only as a sorcery. It can't be on the opponent's turn, which is a shame. So it's okay. Goes with the red and white deck, but yeah, nothing too exciting. At least it can block something. Then we have Tectonic Hazard, a 1-mana sorcery, deals 1 damage to each opponent and each creature they control. Like end the festivities, pretty much. It's yeah, good bit of extra damage. And if we go back to the Deepest Might, instead of doing 1 damage, it's going to do 4 damage. So that really, really boosts the value we're getting for 1 mana from Tectonic Hazard. If you have something else that increases the damage, or something like Mechanized Warfare does extra damage, then this works out much better. But at the moment, if there's creatures with 1 toughness, then at least it kills a few of those. So it can work by itself, but it's better with things that boost it. Then we've got Triumphant Chomp, a 1-mana sorcery. It deals damage to target creature equal to 2 or the greatest power among dinosaurs you control, whichever is greater. Now, in a dinosaur tribal synergy deck, this is going to do at the very least 2 damage to a creature for 1 mana, which is like, okay, is basic. Okay, it's good. It's a good card. It's not, a play with fire. It's not a lightning bolt, but it's okay. But it can deal damage equal to the greatest power among dinosaurs you control. So you could have something with, 7 or 8 power, and suddenly this does that much to a creature. It's a shame it doesn't do it to the opponent's face, but yeah, pretty good removal in a dinosaur deck. Then we have Trumpeting Carnosaur. Speaking of which, there's a 7 power dinosaur, so Triumphant Chomp would do 7 damage for 1 mana. A Trumpeting Carnosaur is a 6 mana 7/6 dinosaur with trample. When it enters, you get to discover 5, which is a good amount of extra value on top of the 7/6 and trample. And you can discard it by paying 3 if you want to, and do 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker. So if you need it earlier on, if you can't get to casting it, it has that versatility as well, which is just great. So yeah, considering it's a 7/6 trample, I would use that in draft for sure. Can we use it in standard? Yeah, probably. In a dinosaur tribal deck, I would use that. Okay, so Volatile Wanderglyph is a 2 mana 2/2 artifact golem. When it becomes tapped, you may discard a card if you do draw a card. So it works well with red and black decks. With the descend mechanic, whenever it becomes tapped, you can discard a card. So you need to tap it. There are ways of tapping things like white. The red and white deck will tap things. So you can tap it automatically every turn. You'll have something that will need to tap things, and you can just filter through your deck. So actually, it's pretty good as long as you have those abilities enabled. If you can tap it reliably, you don't necessarily want to tap this by attacking with it, because there's a good chance it will die. And then we have Zoyawa's Justice, a 2 mana instant. The owner of target artifact or creature with mana value 1 or greater shuffles it into their library, and you discover X, where X is its mana value. So there are different ways you could use this. You could use it on one of your own artifacts or creatures, and then you get to just kind of bring that back. If it's not doing the job that you need it to do, if it's not very effective on the battlefield, or for whatever reason, maybe if the opponent is trying to destroy it, because this is an instant, so you can cast it in response. And yeah, you shuffle it into your library, then you discover X and basically get yourself a replacement, which is up to the same mana value, but could be lower because that's how Discover works. But you could also use it on your opponent's creature. If they're attacking you with a big tramply creature that you just need to get rid of, you can throw that back into their library somewhere, and they get another card with Discover, and you can just basically only hope that the card they get from Discover is not going to help them out quite so much. But it's a gamble either way. If you know you're going to lose without casting this, you can cast this and possibly save yourself. Or you can use it on one of your creatures that they're trying to destroy. There's different things you could do with that. Yeah, and I think it's definitely one that's worth trying out. Whether it becomes really big is probably unlikely, but we'll see what happens with it. So that's all the red cards that we've run through really quickly. Now I'm going to go over my actual favorite budget cards, so commons or uncommons, and my favorite rare or mythic cards from the red cards in Ixalan. So kicking off the uncommons that I think are the best. Belligerent Yearling, I can't get over how good it is with with getting the power from other dinosaurs. If you play the the 7/6 trample dinosaur, this is going to become a 7/2 trample dinosaur as well, and it's already there, so it's going to attack that turn. Yeah, basically, anytime a dinosaur enters, you can make it that much stronger. It's a really good card, really aggressive card. Yeah, I'd definitely use that. My next favorite uncommon is the Scytheclaw Raptor, because it is the enemy of control decks, and if you're playing an aggressive, red deck or red and green deck, or whatever it happens to be, the last thing you want to find is an opponent who's able to kill your creatures, counter your creatures whenever you're trying to attack. You want them to take some punishment for that as well. So doing 4 damage every turn is really cool. So I really like the Scytheclaw Raptor. And as for the rare cards I think are the best, I have to start with Bone Horde Dracosaur. Flying first strike, 5/5 for 5 mana, and gets to potentially make more dinosaurs or just make more treasure and ramp you more. and basically give you extra cards to play as well, like an extra 2 cards in a turn. It's amazing, so much value. The only thing is, yes, it dies. If you play it out, it could die immediately, but to be honest, Shieldred is no different. Could easily be killed as soon as it's played. Doesn't have an ETB effect. Doesn't give you anything until your next turn. So, yeah, it's no different than that. It's just this could kill a Shieldred because it could do first strike and kill it before it does Death Touch to the Dracosaur. So yeah, definitely one of my favorites from the red cards in the set already. Next we have Odra Axonil Deepest Might, which I said I think we're going to see this in standard quite a bit, considering it can make anything do potentially 4 damage when it's even just trying to do 1. It's such a good card. The other side where it transforms, I don't think it's as good. You need a red source to deal 4 damage or more this turn, and then you get to pay an extra 3 and transform it back. I think it's kind of tricky to do, so it's not necessarily going to happen like that. But by itself, 4 mana, 4/4 trample that makes everything else do 4 damage over and over again. That's a lot of value there, so I think that's really cool. And then lastly, the rare I like from the set is Trumpeting Carnosaur. So it's a 6 mana, 7/6 trample, which is a good amount of damage. And it also gets to discover 5 whenever it enters. Now, it doesn't say on this that if you cast it, it discovers 5. It's just whenever it enters. So if you can blink this or something, then you get to discover 5 over and over again. So you don't just get 7/6 trample for 7 mana. You get, that discover 5, which could potentially be really big. You also have the ability to pay 3, discard it, and do 3 damage to something. So it's nice to have that versatility. It's great in the early game if you need it, and can get it to the graveyard, which can work out for other things. Also, if you draw it later on and you need a big spell, then you're going to have a big creature that can potentially get like an extra thing out for you, or draw you extra cards. So there's loads of value you can get from that, as long as you get to 6 mana. Which, I mean, like if you compare this to Atali, obviously Atali is quite a bit better because it can discover anything, and from your deck and the opponent's deck, and it's a 7/7, and it can, transform into the Primal Sickness. It just doesn't have an early play if you need it. So this isn't better than Atali. I would still rather play Atali. But from this set, if you're making an aggressive dinosaur deck, you would have Atali in it, and you'd have this in it. Like you might play Atali, which gets Trumpeting Carnosaur, which then gets some other 5 mana dinosaur out. So I'd include this with Atali, not replacing it. It's still a really good one from the set that I like a lot. So let me know what you think in the comments below about these cards, and if there's any that I've missed that are really cool that I haven't pointed out, or any combos or anything that I haven't seen, let me know in the comments. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this video and want to kind of engage more or support my content, you can join the Game School Dad Discord community through Patreon, and there's all kinds of bonus content on there, from tracking your draft success to just my master value spreadsheet of explaining how I work everything out. And we also have giveaways. The next one in December is for a $25 digital gift card for mtgacodes.com, so you can give your account a boost of cards or other products from the website. So yeah, if you want to check that out, the link is in the description. And let me know what you think about this. Tomorrow we're going to be back with the green cards to break those down. So look out for that. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. And thanks for watching it to the end. I'll see you in the next one.